Welcome to the Soft Skills Salon. Hello, everyone. I remain your host, Diana Kowarski, and I am delighted to be with you today. And in our time together today, we will be privileged to be sharing the podcast with Mike Teape. Since 1994, Mike has been conducting business and personal effectiveness design and delivery training, coaching, train the trainer, and training strategy development for a wide spectrum of clients. He works for global corporations, leading training firms and universities, as well as small and middle market businesses. Mike has obtained unique and relevant market experience in helping companies achieve their goals. In addition to corporate training, Mike provides assistance to improve business effectiveness skills through one-to-one or group coaching and design delivering key business improvement programs. He assists clients in developing their communication skills and crafting their presentation skills for all business situations. He's one busy person. Hello, Mike, and welcome.
Hello, Diana. Thank you for having me.
A real pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I also appreciate that you have already had a chance to go through our questionnaire. So we're going to start with a question that is going to give us some ideas around your own process that I'm sure also can inform some of the processes that you bring in with your clients, whether one-on-one or in groups. And that question reads, how do you contribute or build your own self-confidence?
Okay, well, as a fellow facilitator of learning for a number of years, it's been an interesting roller coaster of confidence, I think. And knowing that self-confidence is something that we have to work at. It's not something you just walk in the room and you have it. Is the core of it. So I have so many techniques that I use for myself, but I also pass those on for my clients, whether it's one-to-one coaching or if we're doing a group session. It's like, look, I'm going through the experience that you're going through. You're having issues with confidence. I do too. And I do suffer from ruminating thoughts. Who doesn't? But the self-doubt, it can be an ever-decreasing circle. So I think the first thing to really say is that I often ask myself, why am I here? Why has this client, why does this person, why does this nonprofit need me right now? So I look for the value that I'm bringing. Well, they asked me to speak. Why did they ask me to speak? Because I know something about the subject, or they want me to instill something in others. And then I focus. Self-confidence comes from stop getting in your own head to getting into, well, how can I help my audience getting into their head? So once I transition to be curious about whoever I'm coaching, the groups, at conferences, wherever I am in a prospect meeting, and I start being curious about the other person, that gives me self-confidence. I'm not focusing on myself. That's one of the key things that I do is I'm curious. I try and solve people's challenges. I want to know what's going on for them, almost to the point where they're like, well, tell me a bit about you. I'm like, oh, okay, yes. And then I'm like, yeah, I haven't spoken about myself yet, but I do that first. That gives me self-confidence, so I relax into it. That's one of the areas that I look for.
Two parts that you've already said, and I'm interested in maybe diving in further. I love that initial question. Why am I here? And it comes in a variety of applications. Why am I here doing this? Why am I here with this person? Why am I here now? Why am I here and not there? Why am I here, etc.? And you mentioned that there's that connection to value for me, and how this is where I wrap my head around it is I think more about purpose. And I think we're coming at the exact same conclusion.
Oh, yeah.
So I love value, but I have a stronger connection with purpose as a word, and maybe as part of the approach that I take. It does answer the exact same series of questions that you brought our attention to. And if you're looking at how to be in tandem with the ruminating, or how to perhaps develop self-awareness, or the undercurrent that I think is flowing in your comments is your relationship with your own self-talk in a sense.
Yes.
Does that
Yes.
resonate?
Yeah.
Because
I think that it's like I've spent a lot of time talking about purpose, and thinking about, well, what do I bring? And that's exactly it. Why am I here? Is actually a splintered question. It has multiple angles, and I can't relate to it more strongly that you need to know your purpose.
right.
It's not just situational. It's an overall purpose of what you do, and I sculpted that, and leaders need to sculpt. Everyone needs to think about, okay, and where am I? Where am I in my career? And right now, it's like, look, I want to make sure that every person in my session, I can connect them to the best practices we're talking about and help them to see how it applies to their reality. And thirdly, give them this is how I can use it. So that's what but my purpose is wrapped up in the experience that I'm giving to
Mm-hmm.
someone, right? That's why I'm here. And then I have another layer of purpose for helping businesses to be effective,
Mm-hmm.
right? They will not, without focusing on the soft skills, as you call it, as it's mentioned, right? Without
Right.
focusing on that, that's the glue, that's the piece of success. So there's a purpose about my purpose for business and my purpose for individuals. And I spent a long time thinking about that. So that's part of when I get my ruminating thoughts, like, oh, well, this isn't going to work, is it? I'm late for it. I haven't had time to prepare. All those things. Like, oh, no, hang on. Why did they? Well, you've been doing this for
Mm-hmm.
some time, and everyone needs to stop their negative, catch themselves with the negative self-talk, stop it, and then that's the why am I? And remind themselves, talk to yourself,
Right.
because be careful what you're saying, because your brain is always listening. It's one of my favorite phrases. You're either conscious of it or it's subconscious, and it's doing a number on you. So yeah,
Certainly. And there's that
definitely effective.
meta narrative that can be developed as a result. So your description as a splintered question, I really love that language, because it absolutely draws a great mental picture and is completely accurate as far as my relationship with why am I here and purpose and value. I also hear in your words that there's an importance of scope or scale, because we can go macro. And on occasion, I'm sure you've had this. I know I have, where I'll be working with someone or with a group, and you'll be trying to craft their own sense of purpose in terms of a particular deliverable, for example, or at this point in their career, as you suggested. And some of us tend to go rather grand, right? Thinking of why one might be on the surface of the planet. And I'm always quite congratulatory if someone can answer that question as to why they are here in general. I think
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I personally don't have an answer. I don't aspire to having an answer. I don't know what that tells you about me, Mike, but I hear that scope and scale insinuation. So we want to go from perhaps a larger generalized beginning to that more micro and maybe a
Yeah.
tactical level.
And I think that's where, if you think about stuff, and I've suffered from nerves going way back. I think I spent 10 years of my life at JP Morgan Chase in learning and development across the globe. And it was my first, and I was overconfident to start with until I knew what I didn't know. And then I was getting flushed, I was stammering, and, I was like, this isn't me. And it's because I was in a different arena and felt conscious that I was incompetent, although that was my own definition of myself.
Hmm.
And that wasn't true, so you have to go micro in order to feel confidence. Confidence is like an enthusiasm, a boost, it's curiosity. It's like feeling like I'm not even worried about what question someone's going to ask me, because we're going to have a discussion about it rather than, well, I hope I've got the right answers. So where are you? Are you in a defensive state
Hmm.
as you're coming in to a situation, feeling a little bit unsure? Where is it coming from? Or am I in a toward state? Um, the work of David Rock talks about
Yes.
the brain science is like, am I actually in the moment and once I get in the moment with the people in the room, as long as I've rehearsed or as long as I know roughly where we're going, I can actually, I'm not, my confidence is not an issue. But how do you it's like opening a door.
Hmm.
And um, I've noticed that when I've been teaching sales pitching training, executive presence training, there's a moment with the person in front of me forgets the worries about everything and is just in the moment, adding value, asking questions, helping someone. So when you get to that level, that's where your self-confidence shines through. That's what I think. So I love what you said. It's all relating back to what you said. It's like, oh yeah, macro down to micro.
Hmm.
Um, and we see it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And your emphasis on curiosity, right, is
Mm,
very well and correctly positioned in how right you are of the focus. As soon as I get out of my own head and try to get into yours, effortfully, clumsily,
mm.
however, effortfully, thoughtfully, deliberately, with, you know, whatever yield I might have, the shift there in focus, there's, I think, a very strong connection to recognizing in that moment that you're absolutely right, Mike. Confidence is a feeling. It's a feeling. And I often, perhaps in a extremely lighthearted way, ask people that procure my services to think of it along the same lines as happy, sleepy, dopey, and grumpy. It is one of those feelings. And
Yeah.
that means that we can be on either side of it, or that we can have perspective on it, or we can analyze what triggers it or what dampens it. Just like sleepy, dopey, happy, grumpy have that same dynamism, right? We can be on any side of those feelings, so to speak. But to return to that idea of curiosity and deliberately bringing the curiosity, I remember working with I thought at the time, rather eloquent leader very early on in my career as a new grad. And they would keep a handwritten note the size of a credit card in their wallet that had a series of questions for them to ask in order
Mm.
to appear interested and hopefully
Yes.
bring genuine enthusiasm to follow. But it was very clear and it was shared with me. I ask these questions so I can be perceived as interested and curious, when at the same time, I may or may not be, which is a lot
Right.
of information for me as a young person, which is, I think, why it has stuck with me. So I like that concept of it being deliberate and effortful, even when we're not sure of what we might have as the answer to why am I here, or what is in your head versus mine. Does that
Mm.
resonate with you?
It does. I mean, it's technique supports reality. So when I think about contributing, that's an example of, well, what if I'm not at my best? What if I've just had an argument? We've had some bad news, business or personal, because we can't separate the two.
Right.
Am I ruminating about something? Then I know I'm always going to come. This is my foundation. This is my lowest bar. I know I'm always going to come back to these questions. So if you want to be more curious and you're finding I really don't know how to get into a
Right.
situation, we use these techniques. So can you explain to me how this would work in such an environment? Can you tell me? Can you explain to me? Can you describe to me? Can you tell me? If you start off those question wise and then pull on something the other person said, you instantly show that you're interested. Yeah. And it gives you time to work out where am I going to go with this conversation, because I really don't know what I don't know. Um, And so that's the three techniques there. Uh, and also, you know, the the bigger the leader, the harder they fall. What do I mean by that? If people have put you on a pedestal, you are the sea level. They're expecting like the dog and pony show. They're expecting you to turn up and show confidence. So have you worked on that? And I've worked on, the three C's. There are many three C's models, but the one that I've used when it comes to my sales pitching, I really love because it gets me in the mindset. And that is the three C's are connect and compel. But the first one is command. So command the room, get the attention before you speak, make some kind of connection. Either you appreciate them, clarify, summarize, they're all techniques. And then you compel them to, well, where are we going with this conversation? Yeah, where's the next point, or is there an action point involved? And it's if you're trying to create a presence, you've got to use some techniques. But what that does is it helps give you the image of self-confidence, but it does actually build your self-confidence. So it hits many different areas.
Yes.
There are lots of techniques, right? There are so many techniques. There's physical techniques. There's things like the three C's. There's questions we can use. And having spent 4 years being petrified of training, I don't know why I kept doing it. I guess it was my job. It was internal at the time. Hey, I better do this. What else am I going to do? Learning techniques and having anchoring moments, physical things that you do that switch on your confidence mode. Sharing that with others has been great because they're like, oh, I've never tried that, or they have tried it, or they do a different version of it. And then it builds your own repertoire of self-confidence. So being aware, taking a check as you're on the train, as you're walking into that office, as you're switching on the screen to go into a Zoom meeting, taking a moment. Where am I? Where do I want to be? Being strategic about what I want to do here. And then if you're still feeling self-doubt around purpose, why am I here? And a little bit of like, because I know what I'm talking about. You have to give yourself some pretty explosive, positive self-talk. So you wrap all those together, and that's how I get my self-confidence over time.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I appreciate that summary. That's really helpful. The last note that snagged some of my thinking in listening to your words was the backdrop to asking questions. Could you tell me more about that? Or could you explain that to me in this way? Or when we are looking to display curiosity intentionally, the backdrop to that suggests to me it might be a bit of humility or a bit of recognition that perhaps I am not that important anymore. Maybe a divestment of ego
Right.
at times. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's if you're in that position where you're curious about someone else, your ego has to disappear, right? Because I'm thinking about you and what you're going through. But what you can do, and I've had this happen to me a number of times, where people they one up your experience. So, oh yeah, well, I had somebody I knew when I lived in New York City a number of years ago. That was quite a few years ago, showing my age a little bit. But I went for drinks, and this very successful HR director was sitting with me, and we were friends of friends. And we were just talking about cars. Well, I've driven this car, and I was like, oh yeah, well, yeah, I like cars too, and this is the sports car I've driven, and then that person then had to say, oh yeah, but I've done this and I've done that, and we got into. I thought this is funny. We keep one upping each other, so I kept going. And I said, yeah, I've driven Formula Ford, not Formula One. Formula Ford at the Goodspeed track. And then the person proceeded to up me again. So that's not said like, oh, well, here's some pictures of me in an F1 car, So are you actually genuinely having an experience with another person? Or are you still trapped in your head? Because if you're trapped in your head and your ego, you're having conversation. That's where you can be overconfident, but you can also be very self-conscious and put yourself down. But
Right.
you can't do that if you're genuinely interested in what the other person's saying and not feeling. And you're right, it's in humility. I don't need to tell you that I've done that 15 years ago. You tell me about a journey you've been on, and like, oh, about managing people. And as a facilitator, we hear lots of how people are interacting and the conversations they're having. But I'm not sitting here thinking, yeah, I did that. That's not right. You should do this. I'm like, really, what are you trying to achieve? So
Right.
the curiosity stays with them, and then your ego can't jump with it. But it takes a lot. It's, I'm me, and you know me, and I'm easy. I'm only one step away from going, well, this is what I've done.
Oh, yeah.
um, and
I
and I can't help it. But you're right. It's you got to self-deprecating humor is where we need to come from. I think
it,
it's my turn of phrase, or I meant humility, but
I understand.
being a
Yeah,
bit self-deprecating really helps.
it
Yeah.
can certainly to create a bit of a social ease with all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I am reminded, although it's not a direct parallel, perhaps of some connection, when I am teaching around professional or business writing, which I've been doing a great deal lately. The turn of phrase I often ask people to consider in that transition away from some of their practices that might not be as reader focused as possible is to go away from trying to impress the reader to instead trying to express information. And I think there might be some
Yeah.
hangover to an applicability to our chat now, because many of us are stuck in impressing both
Yeah.
ourselves, perhaps, and others. Um,
Mm.
and getting out of that can be a bit of a jolt, but maybe self-confidence is the jolt.
Yeah. Look, I have an ego the size of a planet, if I'm honest, and anyone listening that knows me will say, yes, you do. But the trouble when it comes to what I'm going to say really is this is you're right. If we feel as though we have to stand on a stage and be the expert and I'm giving you knowledge. Yeah. Here's my slides, here's my handout, boom, boom, boom. Business writing is a classic example. There's a formula for it and a structure. There is for everything. But if I came down and sat beside you, I said, hey, look at this. Here's some information. What have you done so far? What are you trying to work on right now? And I help them read it. I'm almost like the index, helping them access it. Then you're not in that place of projecting your ego or being the source of all knowledge. You're helping someone look at the information, and you're sitting beside them. Quite frankly, you're partnering with them, and therefore you're not in the spotlight. So your self-confidence, and you're wrapped in your own head, is less. Um, and I think now I'm thinking about it, that was probably one of my techniques. Was well, I don't want to stand up here for too long because I'm getting nervous. Well,
Mhm.
why don't you look at the material, or why don't we get a group discussion? Why don't we take this and play with it? Go into an exercise really quickly, and that would take the eyes off of me onto them, and I could read the room and just help on a smaller basis, and then come back and summarize on stage, so to speak.
Certainly.
Yeah, interesting. You really bring up you're bringing up some thoughts in me, Diana,
Please.
and experiences.
But the transition there from one facilitator to another is perhaps best summarized in
Mm.
pronouns. If you can go from I to we and hang out in we for a long time, getting back to I is a lot easier. And
That's wise words. Yes.
I hear you. And I think your wise words lead us to that next question you selected, with your permission, which reads,
Mm.
what does success leading others look like to you? What are your thoughts, Mike?
I think, a lot of what we've said, the humility, is a huge bit. So there, there are some values of a leader and what are they displaying, I think, that are key for their success in leading others. Um, and again, it goes back to purpose. Is that what am I trying to do with my team, with this organization? Um, am I trying to inspire them? Am I looking for high performance? Am I looking to connect them to purpose and being a facilitator of that, not coming from a point of strength? Even if you're a founder and then it was your idea that started all of this, yeah, that started. Well, how are we going to grow it? Well, I need other people to do that. So it's a partnership approach. It's a support-based approach. Um, and this is something I love and I hate in our industry. Is there's always a phrase of a type of leadership. There's always the latest thing, right?
Yes.
It was authentic leadership, transformational leadership, conscious leadership, and they all have really valid points. But my thought on that is it depends on the situation. What is it? Can a leader see what's needed? Are they looking into that and are socially aware of what's going on in their organization? Say, oh, actually, they do need me to give them confidence by leading from the front of knowledge at this point. But now, I need to back that off and get inclusive and get them working on ideas. I need them to be innovative and creative. I need to have a clear vision of the organization. I think conscious leadership and there's a number of companies that run that specifically. It is being conscious in the moment of what's needed. So they're really coaches. And I think, how do you measure that? Well, I think a leader needs to see how other people are reacting to them. They need to see that people are feel as though they're in, oh, here's a big word, psychological safe environment, that they feel that they could share half-baked ideas, are going to build something with someone. We're going to build on our ideas. We're not in a blame or a judgmental area. And I think my number one thing really is think of a leader. What I do is think of what I don't want to be, how I've been led where I thought, well, I'm not going to do that and do the opposite. There's quite a few bits in there, but success is flexibility, understanding what you're seeing and moving to that and giving a feeling to the other people of that you're with them, you're supporting them and you're encouraging them to achieve their purpose, but also some high performance over time.
Fair enough. And absolutely, there's a lot in what you've offered. So thank you for that. The idea of a partnership approach was a turn of phrase that you offered early on. And I liked that language because there's so much to be said for those many, many different types of trademarked versions of leadership. It's authentic, it's empathetic, it's concise, it's complex, it's inspiring, it's conscious. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And as you said, I don't believe one to be particularly wrong nor one to be singularly correct. There is a spectrum here that has to happen. And the part that I would piggyback on from your words about how that partnership approach is necessarily situationally driven, that tells me that in terms of leading others, that yes, we need to have an effortful and deliberate approach. And at the same time, recognizing that there is data, that there is information to be mined out of relationships to know where we're at. And if there is a culture of risk taking, for example, or if there is a culture where there's a command approach without follow-up, or is there feedback, or is it an open door policy with huge air quotes and no one even comes into the office anymore to have a door, right? And so the idea there of the data that often as leaders isn't sought out or isn't understood or appreciated, because it does mean you need to have the reverb. You need to know it's not in a vacuum if you're working with a partnership approach. And I find, to my experience with my clients, it's that space that has the most tension, because many leaders, even well-intentioned and well-studied and thoughtful and deliberately resilient and moving along, don't take that next nano step of recognizing that if they don't know how well or not, or what's resonating or not, that they're not contributing to the psychological safety, that they're, well, just going through
Yeah.
some issues.
Yeah. And, the trouble is that success in the moment, you may be doing very well with, okay, I'm going to be great vision, inspirational direction. But then once you've done that, you have to be thinking, well, what's next? Because it's not going to be the same.
Mm.
It's actually what's my focus is, or how do I help them to achieve that? So, there are cycles, business cycles, as we know. And one organization I was working for they were changing what they were doing. They do retargeting marketing. So they'd started the industry with a certain way, although they're responsible for those little adverts that pop up on your phone,
Oh, yeah.
get down, get out of the way, all those ones. But that, and that was very much when I was working with them, is very much vision found. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. But after that first initial, then there's 5 other different ways of doing it. And so you have less attachment to that and more about being curious and creative and taking it to the next level. But a founder's not doing that, who they've hired are doing that. So they need to become a coach. They need to bring out the best in the individuals. So that, you have to realize that what you're doing now won't be successful in the future. It's a moment in time. And when we run ourselves, we run our businesses, and we're with a client 1 minute, we're switching a lot faster than a lot of other people because we're being asked to tackle all of these as challenges. Like, I want you to help me with visioning where we're going. I want you to help me with managing change, a reduction, a growth spurt. So we're jumping from each other. Well, what values do we need, and how can we help a leader achieve that in the moment? So we jump around. So yeah, it's
Mike, I
it's
think,
what does success look like? I think it just success depends. But when you've got it good because the people are with you. They're working on the right thing. They're feeling comfortable. They're feeling as they can share ideas, a psychologically safe environment, and they're contributing. They're not just going through the actions or the job list. They're not saying, well, that's not part of my job, or what do you want me to prioritize first?
yes, absolutely. And to one of your points of comparison, potentially it is a moment for you to have me be a bit more self-reflective, because as entrepreneurs and as people who do take on project-based work, perhaps you and I do have a very stilted or slanted appreciation of what it means to lead others in terms of the relationship with change. And in part, it's the nature of the work that you and I both do. Right? The constant is change.
For sure.
There can be a particular perspective that breeds of expectation, and other people also, well, not only embracing change, but expecting it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I've recently celebrated a milestone in my marriage in terms of years in, and I had done some reflecting, thinking, we're both not the same people. And I'm so delighted by that, because there's been a lot of change and a lot of growth. And as a mirror to, my business, if I didn't have relationships that weren't changing, or at least growth positive, not necessarily on the same trajectory, I'd be a very lonely person. But I do think our industry, or certainly entrepreneurs in general, have harnessed some of the skills of expecting there to be an episodic approach to leading, or even a compartmentalized way of work life happening.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you hit a good point. Is that, well, we do have high expectations as well. Well, of course, here's the approach, and they're like, "What do you want me to what?" And when it comes to change, we want them to change from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all
There you
in
go.
leadership. Yeah, there's a quote. There you go. Not going from like, I need to control everything, risk averse, to being in the moment with the conversation, not knowing where it's going to go as a leader. But I want this person to explore their thoughts and attach themselves to what we're trying to achieve right now. It's a big ask, isn't it? When you think about it, it's a big ask, and we do jump in. Here we are, and then in the next day we could be working on a completely different way of being as a leader. And that takes some reflection for us. Okay, I've done this. Now what do I want to do next? What's next?
That returns very nicely to why am I here, and what is my purpose, or what is the value?
Yeah.
And I think as we wrap up our conversation, I'm going to figure out my immediate purpose in figuring out some perhaps merch that says "Know it all to learn it all." Maybe a T-shirt, Mike. I'll give you credit. A cap or a toque of some sort in a Canadian way, or I don't know, a sweatband. Know it all to learn it all. I thank you very, very much for this fantastic conversation and your time. Thank you for being on the podcast.
It was my pleasure. It was a great conversation. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you very much for listening to another dynamic and informative episode of the Soft Skills Salon with your host, Diana Kowarski. Please consider subscribing to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we also encourage you to visit our website and social media links, which you can find in the show's notes. We look forward to bringing you another episode. And remember, conversation is the currency of communication. Bye for now.